You've taken your photos and now you want to make some tweaks to make your good images to look like great images. Welcome back to day 4, and today we're learning about post-processing, aka editing. Ever since the first darkroom, the art of editing a photo has been one of the most essential steps in photography. Good post-processing can bring out the character and emotions of a scene you just witnessed, transforming a good image to a great one. However, the most important step is knowing how to edit image properly in the first place. But it's not an easy task. If you're a beginner, using an editing software can be daunting. What if I can't handle technology? What if it's too complicated of a process? What if it's too time-consuming? What if the images turn out horrible? There's so many ifs. I get it. I've been there. And the first things first, you need to be able to see what a good image is and a bad image. The key is in your perception. If you think heavily edited images are perfect image, then your editing will lean that way, and vice versa. We all have bias towards something. For this class, let's be as neutral as possible and leave our personal preferences for a moment. To be able to see things objectively, we need to see the differences between overexposed and underexposed images and decide what is the correct exposure. Understand white balance where white looks white, as it should, not green, yellow, or blue. See the contrast between dark and light. Decide on noise. Once we have a basic idea, then editing will be a breeze, and we can get more creative from a solid image base, or what I like to call it, a clean edit. For this demonstration, I'll be using Adobe Camera Raw, but this technique can be applied to any editing software. Later, I'll share with you some applications I like to use in my own photos. Let's dive right in. Number 1, correct exposure. Correct exposure means getting the balance right between the 3 components of the exposure triangle. Previously, we discussed the aperture, shutter speed, and ISO. Balancing all 3 correctly will give you a perfectly exposed image. That means no blown highlights or details are lost entirely in the shadow or darker areas of the image that should be visible. The most useful tool when you're editing is to see if your exposure is perfect, is to look at the histogram. You can also view histogram when you have just taken a photo, since there is a histogram on the display of many cameras these days. Simply put, a histogram is a representation of an exposure value distribution across your image in a form of a visual graph. Just looking at the histogram, you can immediately tell whether there's an even spread exposure values on the image, judging from the troughs and the crest of the graph. If the image that you shot is incorrect exposure, then your editing is your solution. You can move the sliders of your editing software to increase the exposure of the photo if it's too dark, or decrease your exposure if the photo is too bright. You can usually recover some blown out highlights in the case of overexposure. The histogram touches both left and right edges. This would indicate the dark and light parts of the image that are clipped, and therefore, there is overexposure and underexposure. This is an okay image as nothing touches the edges, but it is too bright for me. The next image shows an overexposed image with an exposure turned up, and the image on the right side shows an underexposed image with the exposure turned down. See what the histogram is doing to these images? Next is white balance. Simply put, white balance is adjustment on your camera that reads the color temperature of the light that you're shooting in relation to the neutral white. Perfect white balance should show white to white. You can, however, go for warm white or a cool white by adjusting the white balance slider. Generally speaking, what you don't want the image to look is too yellow, too orange, or too blue. Next is contrast. The contrast is not rocket science in my opinion. It is simply to do with the strength of the blacks of the photo. After the previous adjustments, our photo is still looking relatively flat. We just need to fiddle with the blacks and shadows and highlights. Just remember, not to overdo your blacks or whites, or you just want to do a little bit more contrast, play with the other sliders to get the result that you want. Just do so gently. A touch here, a touch there, rather than extreme adjustments. Next is noise and sharpening. If you click the 3rd tab labeled Detail, you would get to the panel where you can adjust the noise and sharpening. Again, gentle adjustments are needed here. It is vital to zoom in on the photo so you can see what the adjustments are doing to the image. Luminance has to do with the smoothness of the pixels. You don't want to do too much or you lose definition. Now I have a clean edit. There's so much I could do here with the photo. The eyes are a bit tad soft. We could add vignettes or change the appearance of the background. I could add sun flares or textures. The possibilities are endless, but most of that can happen in Photoshop. I hope this has helped you to understand the basics of editing. The last thing I want to share with you are some apps I use and recommend to edit my photos, starting with the mobiles, these. And if you are more ambitious, if you want to look at more PC and Mac apps, look at these. That's it for today's class. And on that note, I'll see you tomorrow. Bye.